The scariest experience I've ever had in my life took place about 5 years ago. It all started when I was driving home late at night. It was a little bit past 11 p.m. and I was still about an hour away from home. I was driving on a rural road out in the country a little bit. There was farmlands and woods in the surrounding area and not many cities or businesses nearby. At the time, I drove a car that was almost 20 years old. It had some problems and I had been meaning to buy a new car, but I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. I was really busy with work and stuff, and car shopping can be a hassle. But on this night, as I was driving along a quiet road, my car started to break down. I didn't know what the problem was at the time, but it turned out it was an alternator going bad. This caused the battery in my car to die, and my engine felt like it was losing power. Soon, I realized that I would have to pull over and call my roadside service. But when the car came to a complete stop and I took out my phone, I wasn't receiving any kind of a signal. It didn't really surprise me given the fact that I was kind of in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't sure what to do. It really didn't look like there was any gas stations or businesses nearby. I also didn't see any houses immediately nearby. To my right was a little bit of trees and woods, and to my left was just a big field. I restarted my phone and kept trying it, hoping that somehow I would get a signal. I didn't know enough about cars to try and work on it myself. Meanwhile, I hadn't seen another car on the road at all. The thought of trying to hitchhike did come into my mind, but I quickly pushed that thought away. I knew how dangerous that could potentially be. There had to be a better way for me to get out of this situation. My thinking at the time was to let my car sit for a while and try to start it again in about 10 minutes. Again, I didn't know what the problem was at the time. I thought maybe it was overheating or something, and I could let it cool down. I probably sound dumb to anyone that's a car expert, but clearly I'm not one. Plus, I was only 20 years old and basically a kid. As I sat there alone in the dark and quiet night, I couldn't help but feel really creeped out. I only heard some crickets and frogs in the distance. There was no streetlights or anything either, so it was very dark out. As time went on, I was starting to get a little bit paranoid. Then, about 5 minutes later, I saw headlights of another car coming down the street from behind me. I looked back, and as they approached, I saw that it was an older-looking sedan. This car had to be at least 25 years old, so it was even older than mine. I expected the car to drive right past me, but I noticed that the car was going slower and significantly slowed down when it got close to me. I didn't know whether to feel nervous or relieved, and I can tell you right now that I was feeling a lot more nervous. Sure enough, the car pulled right in front of me to the side of the road and then stopped. Then the driver's door opened and a man got out. He looked to be in his 40s or 50s and started approaching my vehicle. I opened my door and got out. He asked me what the problem was, and I said I wasn't sure, but my car just broke down. The man said that he knew of a gas station just a couple of miles up the road and offered to give me a lift. I really didn't want to accept a ride from a stranger. I told him no thanks and said all I really needed was a phone. I asked to borrow his cell phone to call my roadside service. The man told me that these areas had weak signal and that wouldn't work because he couldn't get any signal here either. I thought about what to do. Then I asked the man exactly how many miles it was to the gas station. He said about 4 or 5. If I walked there, it would probably take me about an hour just to get there and then another hour to get back. I realized that it made a lot more sense to just accept the ride from the guy. Chances are he would be fine and a good person. Although for some reason he just gave me a bad feeling immediately. Reluctantly, I accepted his offer, and he told me to get in the passenger side of his car. When I got inside, I saw that the car was in fact very old. I'm not sure exactly what kind of car it was, but it was probably from the 1980s. It smelled badly of cigarettes, and there was a bunch of empty beer cans in the back, which did not set me at ease in the slightest bit. I buckled up and thanked the man for giving me a lift, trying to make good conversation. He said no problem and then began driving. For the first part of the drive, though, he didn't say anything. I wasn't really sure of anything to say either. I was feeling kind of awkward and nothing was coming to my mind. We kept driving down that road and it was more of the same scenery, just trees and wildland on both sides. After at least 5 minutes, I figured that we would have to come up on a town or something, but we didn't. I finally had the courage to speak and asked the man if the gas station was coming up. He said yes, and it would be pretty soon. I remember that I asked him what kind of gas station it was for some reason, and he said he wasn't sure. At least another couple minutes went by, and I was feeling that something was off for sure. We hadn't passed any gas stations or anything like that. I said to the man, "This is farther than I thought it would be." I then told him that I felt bad making him drive all this way. He just said that it was fine. The man was not very talkative at all. Each minute that went by, my heart was beating faster and I was getting more nervous. Soon, I finally saw a gas station up ahead to the right side. That had to be it. But this certainly was more than 4 or 5 miles from my car. We had been driving for at least 15 minutes. I asked the man if that was it, but he didn't respond to me. He just drove right past it. When he did, my heart sank. I had a terrible feeling and said to the man that I thought he missed the gas station. Again, he still didn't answer me. Now I knew something was very wrong. I didn't know what to do, but I just wanted to get out of that car. Even sitting in my car on the side of the road stranded would be better than being in that guy's car with him. I wanted to do something, but I wasn't sure what. After another minute or so, I pulled out my phone. I turned it on and looked at it and saw that I still had 0 bars. But as I was noticing that, the man finally spoke again. He said in a stern voice for me to put the phone away. I did, out of fear. We were traveling probably about 50 miles per hour down the road. My thoughts turned to jumping out of the car to the side of the road. There was a grass ditch on the right and a very small shoulder only a few feet past it. But that would still injure me. I looked at the man's door, and the car was so old that you could just pull up the lock to unlock it. I considered doing it, but we were just going too fast. About another couple minutes went by. Now I had been in the car with the man for like 20 or 30 minutes total. I had no clue where he was taking me or what he was doing. He hadn't spoken or said anything in a while. Then I saw a sharp turn coming up ahead. The man would probably have to slow down significantly because this was really sharp. I felt like this was my big opportunity. He began slowing down, and when he got to the turn, we were probably only going like 20 miles per hour. As soon as he hit the middle part of the turn and we were probably traveling the slowest, I turned to my right. I reached and unlocked the door, then opened it, all within the span of like 2 seconds. Then I jumped out as far as I could. When I hit the ground, my feet hit first on the edge of the road, and my body then tumbled into the grass of the ditch. It hurt pretty bad, but it could have been a lot worse. I just felt a little bit shaken up and was able to get to my feet. I saw the man's brake lights and heard his tires screeching. I knew I needed to get out of there, and I took off running into the woods. I didn't know where I was going, but I ran as fast as possible. The woods were not very dense, but it would still be really hard to see me with how dark it was. I kept running as fast as possible and never heard the man running after me or leave his vehicle or anything like that. Soon, I was able to slow down and walk instead of run. I saw a light in the distance and followed it. When I got closer, I noticed that it was a light coming from the front step of a house. This house was certainly out in the middle of nowhere, but I was very happy to see it. I went to the front door and pounded on it. The homeowner, luckily, was home and answered the door. I asked them to call the police, which they did. They didn't let me in the house, but said that I could wait in the driveway. That was fine with me because I felt safe enough that the man wouldn't come back. It took about 10 minutes, but the police got there and I told them everything. I was able to call my roadside service and got a ride back to my vehicle. To make the rest of the story short, I got home all right that night. It was extremely late, but what mattered is that I was back and that I was safe. I ended up getting a new car shortly after that as well. I honestly don't know whatever happened to the man. I just hope that he didn't pick up anybody else. I'm not sure where we were going, but I feel lucky to have made it out of there.
I used to work at a Blockbuster video store many years ago. When I had the job, I was about 18 years old. My main job was working as a cashier, and typically there would be about 2 or 3 of us working at once. I liked all of my coworkers and was friends with most of them. One night, I was working with Lisa, who was my same age, and we had gone to the same high school. We closed at 8 p.m. on weeknights and 9 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. This was a weeknight, and it had been a pretty quiet day. For the last hour or so of our shift, we only got one customer. Both myself and Lisa were tired from the long day, and we were excited to go home. When it got to be 7:50 p.m., we decided to just close early. Now, we weren't really supposed to do this, and we were supposed to stay open until 8, which was our official hours, but we didn't think anybody else was going to come in. I went over and looked out into the small parking lot and made sure nobody else was there. It was just my car out there because Lisa had gotten a ride there and I was going to be giving her a ride home. I locked up the doors and then we waited until 7:55 to clock out and actually leave. We had already done the cleaning that we were supposed to do and made sure that everything was in order. The store wasn't all that big, and it was pretty easy to maintain when there weren't too many customers. When it was 7:55, Lisa and I left the store and headed for my car. We got inside my car and drove through the parking lot to a larger connected parking lot. Then we would take the exit onto one of the main roads, but as soon as we got into the bigger parking lot, I noticed that another car was pulling into the Blockbuster lot. The car drove right up to the side of the building in front of the door and then stopped. I stopped the car because I was curious to see if the people were going to try to get inside. Maybe they were just going to return something, is what I figured. We watched the car stop, and then all of the passengers' doors opened and 3 men got out. They walked up to the front doors and seemingly tried to go inside. I felt kind of guilty because the time was only 9:57 now, and technically we were still supposed to be open, but we had left a little bit early. But at the same time, going to a store 3 minutes before they close is a bit risky as well. The men stood around the door for about 30 seconds or so. The car had driven a little ways up, and then the men turned to go back to the car. When they turned around is when I noticed that they were all wearing ski masks. We were kind of far away, and from the back, it looked like they were just wearing hats or sweatshirts with hoods. They all returned to the car, and then the car began to drive away immediately. Lisa and I couldn't believe what we had seen. Had those men been trying to get inside and rob the store? Why else would they go there with ski masks on? Suddenly, we were both really happy that we had closed early and left. Maybe we narrowly avoided a disaster. Of course, we didn't know for sure, but it seemed pretty likely. The next week, Lisa and I found ourselves working together on another weeknight. This night had been a little bit busier, and we were occupied pretty much right up until close. The thought of closing early hadn't even came into our minds. It was finally just before 8 p.m. and the time to get ready to close. We hadn't had any customers in maybe 10 minutes at that time. That's when I went to look out the front doors, and when I did, I noticed a car driving up, and I got a bad feeling for some reason. That's when I realized that it was the same car that we had seen the previous week. I scrambled to lock the doors as quickly as I could. The car casually drove into the parking lot and then up to the side of the building. It got closer, and I just barely got the doors locked before the car pulled right out front. I jumped back and then hid behind a display before they would see me. I told Lisa that the same car was here from the previous week. She asked if we should call the police. We decided to wait and see if they had ski masks on again. Sure enough, they did. 3 men got out and walked right up to the front door. They tried opening it, but it was locked. I was hoping that they wouldn't be able to see me. Lisa ducked down behind the counter. I looked at my watch, and the time was 8:54. Then, one of the guys knocked on the front door. I heard somebody say, "I know you're in there. Let us in." I started to feel really scared then. They must have seen our cars parked right out front, or possibly had seen me as they drove up. I knew that I wasn't going to open the door for them, though. Then, one of the guys said, "Open the door or we'll have to smash it." Lisa was near the phone, and I hoped that she would call the police. I didn't want to yell out to her, or I would give away my position. I tried to crawl from the display that I was hiding behind into one of the aisles, but to do so, I might be partially in view of the men. I sat there for a few seconds before finally jumping to the aisle. When I did, I heard one of the men say, "I see you." I ran through the back of the aisle, and I heard Lisa say that she had called the police. One of the men started to then bang on the door as if to try to break it. I ran through the aisles and eventually made my way to the counter where Lisa was hiding. Then I got behind it with her and we both took cover. The police would arrive any minute and we just had to wait then. The men stopped banging on the door but stayed there for a few more minutes. At last, I heard a siren in the distance and then the sound of the men scrambling to get back in their car. We heard a screeching of tires and then the car drive away. And not long after that at all, the police were there. We told them a description of the car and everything that had happened. It didn't take long for the police to catch up to the men in ski masks. I don't believe they got in too much trouble though, because they didn't actually break in, but just threatened to, but it was pretty obvious what their intentions were. Luckily, they never came back after that.
I used to be a janitor for a high school. It was a job that I only had for about a year, and this was back in 2019. The job was not too bad, but I moved on to other things later. For the most part, when I worked as a janitor, I would work overnights in the high school and typically was all by myself. I would start at 9 o'clock at night
and get off at 5 o'clock in the morning. The high school was large, but not so big that I couldn't manage it. With all that time and the whole place to myself, I could clean everything that I was supposed to. A few times, due to events on the school campus, there were some people there around the time I started, but they would usually be gone within an hour or two. I would do the things that you would expect: mop floors, vacuum, sweep, and maintain the bathrooms. Not every room in the school required attention daily, so it's not like I was cleaning every single classroom every night. I would even have some downtime where I would just go on my phone or whatever. It was honestly a decent job. The only downside was that I had to be nocturnal and work overnights and sleep during the day. The other downside was that I was all by myself all night in a school, which sometimes felt sort of creepy. Most of the lights would be off, and a lot of them were motion-detected lights, so they would turn on when I went near them. One night, I was working in a random hallway cleaning the floors. It was probably about midnight or 1 a.m. I remember that I thought I heard footsteps coming from not that far away. I looked over, but saw nothing. Now, the footsteps might not have been in my sight and come from around the corner. I walked over, wondering who was in here. As far as I knew, I was all by myself, like always. When I made it to the end of the hallway, I looked around, but saw nothing. I went back over to where I had been and continued work. Maybe I had just imagined it. I wasn't 100% sure because it hadn't been very loud. But probably 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps again. This time, I knew I was hearing it. I looked to the end of the hallway, and when I did, saw a man walking by. I only saw him for a couple of seconds because he walked past the hall to another. He was only visible for a short amount of time. I could tell that it was a man though, and seemingly an adult. But beyond that, I couldn't really tell any details because he was kind of far away. I started walking over and called out, asking who was there. Nobody was supposed to be in the school at this time. Nobody answered me when I called out though. When I got to the end of the hallway and looked, he was gone. There were other hallways that he could have gone down though. I walked a little ways farther looking around and asking if anybody was there. But I saw no one and didn't hear anything either. After that, I wasn't really sure what to do. I just ended up going back to work where I had been. Some time went by, and eventually I moved into another hallway. Probably 3 hours or so after the last time I saw the guy, something else happened. This time, I was facing the end of the hallway, and out of nowhere, I heard this noise behind me. I couldn't really tell what it was. I turned around and looked back, and saw a basketball rolling right in my direction. It went past me and hit a locker. When I looked up to where it had been rolling from, I didn't see anybody. I suspected that whoever was in the building stood at the end of the hallway that I was in and rolled the ball towards me. Then they moved away out of my sight, but why they did it, I had no idea. I picked up the ball and walked to the end of the hallway to where it had been rolled from. I called out once more, asking if anybody was there. Still, nobody answered me. I stood there in silence, looking around for like 5 minutes. I didn't see or hear anything at all. Somebody was messing with me, but I didn't know why. I mean, they weren't even supposed to be here in the first place. Once more, I went back to work. From that point on, I wasn't bothered again for the rest of my shift that day. Just before I was done, I decided to walk all around the school to look for the person. I went into every wing and hallway and asked if anybody was there in each one. I even checked all of the bathrooms, but nobody ever answered me, and I didn't see anyone either. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I got off, and another janitor got there. I told him about what had happened and asked him to keep an eye out for the guy. Then I left the school and drove home. During this time, I was living in a small house by myself, about 10 minutes away from the school. I got back, and my typical routine was to go to bed and get some sleep. It was strange to go to sleep at like 6 a.m., but I got used to it. So on this day, it was probably 5 minutes after I got back home and I was in my kitchen. That's when I heard a knock on my front door. Instantly, I was confused. I walked over to the living room and looked out of the front window. Nobody was there. Just off in the distance, I saw a guy walking down the street. I saw him for just a second or two before he went out of my sight. It looked like the same guy who had been inside the school. I was so creeped out, I didn't fall asleep for hours. But luckily, the man never returned. And after that day, nothing like that happened in the school ever again either. I still wonder though, who he was and what he was doing.
This happened to me last summer. It was during a road trip that I was taking from my home in Ohio to New York. It started out well. I was making good time, the weather was great, and I was enjoying the views as I made my way down the freeways. I had decided that I would try my best to do the whole drive in one day because it was about an 8-hour drive for me. I already had a hotel booked, and I was on pace to get there at about 10 p.m. until I hit some traffic about 5 hours into the drive. It eventually cleared up, and at about 9 p.m., I was only 2 hours away from my hotel. But that's when things started to get strange. The roads were much quieter now with it being dark out. I was driving in the right lane with my car on cruise control. I was kind of zoned out, just driving and listening to the radio, when I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There was a car next to me, and I realized that it had been next to me for seemingly a while now. I looked over at it and could see that the car seemed to be going the exact same speed as me, and that I was perfectly aligned with the driver's window so I could see inside the car. When I looked over, I saw that the driver of the car was looking right at me. This car was a black Jeep SUV, and it looked a little bit old. His front passenger side window was rolled down, allowing me to see him pretty clearly. The driver looked to be a man wearing a baseball cap and big sunglasses. He was just staring at me. Then he started to point. I watched him point at me, and I was really confused. I gave a little smile, thinking it was a joke, and then focused my eyes back onto the road. I could tell out of my side vision, though, that the man was still pointing at me. Not only that, but he seemed to be motioning now. I looked over again. Now the man was pointing at me and then moving his hand around a little bit. I thought maybe he saw something wrong with my car, like maybe a flat tire. I looked at the guy with a confused face. The guy was still pointing at me, and it appeared as though he was motioning for me to pull over now. It seemed weird to me, and I kinda had to get gas anyways. I was at a quarter tank, so I decided at the next exit I would pull off. As I drove down the road, the man remained next to me. I kept seeing him look over or make more hand gestures to me. I took the car off of cruise control because this guy was starting to make me really uncomfortable. But when I slowed down or sped up, he would quickly adjust his speed to match mine. At last, after probably 5 minutes, I saw an exit and I took it. I put my turn signal on a little bit late, just in case the guy was going to try to follow me. When I took the exit though, he didn't. I watched him just keep driving down the freeway. I was relieved and figured maybe he was trying to point something out that was wrong with my car. Either way, it was a rather strange way of doing it. I entered a little town with a gas station a short ways down the road and pulled into it. It was nice and a pretty big gas station. I was able to fill up my tank and then got out of my car to examine it. When I did, everything seemed fine. I looked all around it. My tires weren't low, my license plates were on all correctly, taillights and headlights were also working. I didn't know what the guy was gesturing about. I just shrugged it off and decided to finish up my drive. I only had about an hour and a half left until my hotel, and I was starting to get tired. I left the gas station and then took the ramp to go back onto the freeway that I had been driving on. As I drove down the ramp and was beginning to merge back onto the freeway though, I saw a car pull over on the side of the road up ahead. When I got closer, I recognized it to be a black Jeep. It was just sitting there. Could it be the same guy? As I approached it, I saw it start to move again, and after I passed it, I saw that it was now merging back onto the freeway. My heart dropped. Were they waiting for me? I kept driving and watched them speed up and then start to drive next to me again. Once again, the guy rolled down his window and started looking at me. This time, I rolled down my window as well. He was motioning for me to pull over, and I yelled out my window to him. I asked him what he wanted, but I didn't get a vocal response, just more pointing. The guy's face remained expressionless the entire time I saw him. I don't know why, but I decided to pull over. I thought maybe something was wrong with my car and I just hadn't seen it when I looked at it. I was definitely no car expert by any means. I slowed down, and so did the man. Eventually, I came to a stop on the side of the road. I saw that the Jeep slowed down and pulled over to a stop maybe 50 feet in front of me. We both sat there stopped for a few seconds. Then all of a sudden, I saw the two rear doors of the Jeep open up. Two large men came out and started approaching my vehicle quickly. The men were both wearing jackets and had on baseball caps and sunglasses as well. As they got closer, their pace changed from a fast walk to a jog. I put my car back into drive at that point, and when they were maybe just 15 feet away, I pulled back onto the freeway and drove away. Luckily, no other cars were going down the freeway at that moment. I sped away, and as the men realized they wouldn't reach my car, they turned and ran back to the Jeep, which still had the driver inside of it. I floored it, and was able to put some ground between myself and the Jeep before the guys got back inside of it. I could see it start to drive again, and I kept driving. I went a ways down the road, and the Jeep was still pretty far behind me. I noticed an exit and immediately took it and began driving down random roads. After that, I took a different route to get to my hotel without going back on that freeway. I didn't see the Jeep again, and it took me almost an hour longer to get to my hotel, but it was well worth it to not run into those people again.
This is something that happened 2 months ago. I live in a quiet neighborhood and often go on night walks. I've always been a night owl, and the warmer climate that I live in makes it uncomfortable to go on walks in the heat, especially during that time of year. Other times, it's okay. It might seem a little bit strange to go walking late at night, but those are my reasons, and I've been doing it for a long time. So anyways, I usually just walk the neighborhood, and I'm out for maybe 30 minutes to an hour at most. There's a sidewalk that I walk on that goes down all the streets in my neighborhood. I usually also never see anybody else outside, obviously because of how late it is. I didn't walk every single night, but probably 3 or 4 times a week. One night, I went out walking at probably 10 p.m. I walked to the end of my street where it intersects with another. Then I walked down that street. Both of them are residential and really quiet, especially at night. I walked down this street for a while, and maybe 10 minutes later, was coming to the end of it, and then probably going to turn around and go back. That's when I heard what sounded like a car coming from behind me. I turned around and saw a car with no headlights on approaching. The car was driving extremely slow. I kept walking, not thinking all that much of it. I expected it to pass me by, but after a few seconds, it didn't. I looked back again, and the car was a little bit closer to me, but still behind me. The area on the sidewalk that I was walking was now not very well lit. The streetlights were less frequent here, and I was starting to get a bad feeling about this situation. About another minute went by, and I was still walking on the sidewalk, and the car hadn't passed me, but it was getting closer, very slowly. It must have been driving less than 5 miles per hour, because I was walking sort of fast, but not that fast. Soon, though, the car finally made it even with me. I hesitated to look over, but I did. The car was a 4-door sedan, somewhat old-looking and dark gray in color. When I looked over, I also saw that there appeared to be only one person in the car, and it was a man driving. He looked over at me, and I saw that the guy was wearing a black ski mask. Now I was even more suspicious. I kept walking, and he maintained speed with me. After about 30 more seconds of that, I came to a stop. I decided to turn around and go back home. When I stopped, the car stopped as well. Then I started walking back, and I watched the car start to turn around. When it did, I knew that I needed to get away. I wouldn't be able to outrun the car either. It quickly got back up to even with me again, and it looked like the car was starting to pull over. I was walking in front of somebody's house, so I turned and walked right up their driveway to the front door. The car stopped and was parked out front. I knocked on the front door to whoever's house this was. I didn't even know who lived here, but I was hoping that they would answer. Even though it was a little bit late, luckily, they did. A woman answered the door and asked what it was that I wanted. I turned around to show her the car that was following me and started to tell her what was going on. When I did, the car on the side of the street suddenly sped off, screeching its tires in the process. We talked about it briefly, and I felt better now that the car was gone and I was talking to somebody else. I said that I should be able to make it home all right now, and then left the woman's house. I got back onto the sidewalk and carefully looked around. I didn't see the car anywhere. I started walking back home as fast as I possibly could. I was also looking around the whole time to make sure that I didn't see the car anymore. Eventually, I was able to make it back to my street, and soon was just a short ways from my house. When I was maybe 100 feet from my own driveway, I looked to the very end of the street and saw the car coming.
It was really far away and driving slow. I started running as fast as I possibly could, cutting through my front yard to make it to the door faster. I made it there, unlocked the door as quickly as possible, and then went inside the house. I slammed the door shut behind me and then looked out the window. The car drove by at an extremely slow speed. It passed by my house though and drove away. It felt so much better to be safe inside. I don't think whoever was driving the car watched me go inside, or at least knew that I lived there. At least I hope not. I haven't seen that car since. I also have stopped walking outside late at night after that experience. I'm not sure who that person was or what they wanted, but I'm glad that I got away from them.
A couple of years ago, I lived alone in an apartment. It was on the 4th floor of the building, which was a pretty typical apartment building. I think it had 5 floors total and was relatively old and close to the city. My apartment was 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom with a kitchen and a living room. It wasn't that big, but had everything that I needed for just me living there. I guess after about 3 or 4 months of being there, one night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I remember that immediately I heard some sounds, as if there was somebody else in my apartment. I thought I heard footsteps of somebody walking near the front door. I sat up and turned my light on. The noises seemed to stop after that. I sat in bed for a while before I felt brave enough to get up and open my bedroom door. Eventually, I did. I looked out into my dark living room and kitchen. I turned on the lights, and everything seemed normal. I must have been hearing things or something. After looking around my apartment and double-checking to see that the door was still locked, I went back to bed. Nothing else that was strange happened for like a month. But then, almost the exact same thing happened again. I was woken up in the night, hearing noises inside my apartment. This time, I sat laying in bed trying hard to listen to the noises to detect what exactly they were. They really weren't that loud, but it did sound like somebody was walking inside my apartment. All of my lights were off inside, including my bedroom, so I really couldn't see a thing. I thought about reaching over and turning on the light, but I was just really focused on listening to the noise. Was there somehow a chance that I was hearing something other than what it sounded like? Maybe I was hearing someone on the floor above or below my apartment, or maybe I was just hearing random noises that buildings make. But no, this was for sure the sound of somebody walking around in my apartment, and now it sounded like the footsteps were right outside my bedroom door. Then I heard the door handle start to turn, and I heard the creak of my door opening. I thought my heart would pound right out of my chest. I got really hot and sweaty. And as the door opened, I looked right at the opening. The door got about halfway open, and I saw the figure of a man standing in the doorway. He appeared to be looking right at me, but I couldn't tell any details about him at all in the dark, just that he was there. I was sitting up in my bed, and he stood there for maybe 10 seconds before I couldn't help but let out a scream. When I did, the man backed up and shut the door. I was screaming like a crazy person for like a minute straight. By the time I composed myself, I grabbed my phone and called the police. They arrived at my apartment a while later, and when they looked around, whoever had been in my apartment was now gone. There was no evidence left behind, and there were no signs of forced entry. My door was still even locked. None of my windows were open or anything like that either. I was so puzzled by this. I knew what I had seen though, but all I was able to give was the description of a man that was sort of tall. I couldn't tell anything about him really. It was like 2 a.m. and the police left. I barely slept at all for the rest of the night. I didn't know what to do. I worried that I was going insane. Over the next few days, things got a little bit back to normal, but I was worried for something like this to happen again. And then, an idea came to me. I went to the store, and I got 2 things. The first was a lock for my bedroom door, and the second was a motion-detecting security camera. It was a little bit expensive, but I needed answers. I set it up inside my apartment, facing the door and most of the kitchen area where I had heard the footsteps. I hid the camera as best as I could on my bookshelf. Then, I set up a lock on my bedroom door so I would feel more safe as I slept. I set the camera every night before bed, but for the longest time, nothing happened. Of course, I was happy about this, but at the same time, I was always a little bit worried about whoever it was returning. I would say it was like maybe 3 weeks since the last incident, and then something happened. I was once again woken up to hear what sounded like the door to my apartment opening. I heard footsteps once again, but this time, they were really fast. They went straight towards my bedroom door and were much louder than before. Whoever it was tried opening the door, but this time it was locked. They tried violently and quickly turning the knob several more times before stopping. I screamed that I was calling the police. This caused whoever was there to walk back and straight out my door. As soon as they left, I got up and ran out to get my camera. I went back into my bedroom and locked the door again. From there, I watched the footage. It had recorded the entire thing. When I played the video, I saw a man walking right into my apartment as if the front door wasn't even locked. When the man walked in, I recognized him. It was my next-door neighbor. I didn't know the guy well at all, but I knew that his name was Jim. I had only briefly said hi to him one time in the hallway. After seeing this, I called the police again. They arrived and had remembered me from before. This time, I had evidence to show them. When they watched the video, they went next door and confronted Jim. At first, he was pretending to be asleep and that the police woke him up, but when he was told there was video evidence, he seemed to get angry. He flat out claimed it wasn't him and denied it, but then later changed his story that he must have been sleepwalking. But the police weren't buying it and took him in. I'm really glad they did, because he later admitted to being awake the whole time, and the way he was able to get inside my apartment was because he somehow had a spare key. How he had an extra key to my place, I'm not sure, but I'm glad I don't have to worry about him anymore.
During a time when I was done with college and wasn't able to find a job right away, I took a job at a 7-Eleven because I needed money. I worked mostly late night and overnight shifts. What I liked about this was that there wasn't many people that came in, and I would have a lot of free time by myself to play on my phone or listen to podcasts. I was always a night owl, but I didn't really like staying up all night when I would have to work those hours. Anyways, I'd been working there for maybe about 2 months, and one night I was working by myself very late. It was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but I don't remember the exact time. The location that our 7-Eleven is at is on a road just off the highway, and we're really busy during the day, but not so much at night. We got several customers early on, and for the first few hours I had quite a bit to do actually. But now we would get only like one person every 20 minutes or so, and I started to get bored. I noticed in the back corner of the store where we had the soda machine and icy machines, there was a spill on the floor. Seeing as though we didn't have any customers, I decided to go over and mop it up. I left the counter and walked over to the back near the bathrooms where we kept the mop, then over to the corner where the spill was. I saw the spill. Looked like Coca-Cola. Thankfully, the floor hadn't gotten all gross and sticky yet, and the mop was working well. As I was mopping, I suddenly heard the sound of the front door opening and somebody walk inside. Realizing I wasn't at my counter, I rested the mop against the wall and looked over to see who had entered our store. Where I was, you couldn't see the front door, and whoever was in the front door couldn't see me either. I could, however, just see the front counter. I saw somebody standing at the front counter with their back to me. They seemed to be looking around as though they were looking for someone who worked there. Realizing I needed to go back there, I took a couple of steps over to them, and as I did, I noticed them turn and their head went to the side. They hadn't noticed me, but I did see them looking to the side, revealing that they were wearing some sort of mask. It appeared to be a really creepy looking clown mask. I then noticed that he was wearing a dark blue jacket and his right hand was in his pocket. Immediately I got a bad feeling, as if he was up to no good and possibly looking to rob the place. I froze in place, telling myself to stop being scared for no reason and to just go. I thought, what are the odds he's trying to rob the store? It had never happened before. But as I was standing there, I watched the man then go around and behind the counter himself. As a pure reaction to this, I jumped behind the nearest aisle and hid. I could hear the man messing with stuff behind the counter, and it sounded like he was going through the cash register. I figured he was in fact robbing the place, and as I was hiding back there, I decided to call the police. I got up my phone and dialed, but as soon as I heard the 911 operator answer the phone, I suddenly heard the man go quiet from whatever he was doing and say something. Out of fear, I quickly hung up the phone and held my breath. I heard the man shout from behind the counter, asking who was inside and to come out now. He spoke in a loud and demanding tone. I wasn't going to, though. I was way too scared to move. At this point, I just wanted to get out of there. I knew our store was being robbed, but they didn't pay me enough to try to stop this guy. I just wanted to call the police again, but obviously the man could hear me if I did. I heard his footsteps moving out from behind the counter and get a little bit closer to me. But then they stopped and I didn't hear anything. I was not moving a muscle and I was being as quiet as I possibly could be. Then I heard the door to the building open and shut. I guessed that the guy was leaving because I didn't hear anything else for about a minute after that. Finally, I got up and slowly took a few steps out. I still heard nothing and knew this had to mean that the guy was gone. I walked over to the counter to examine what exactly the man had done and how much he had took. When I got there, though, I passed by the front of the counter where I could see clearly outside. I saw that the man was standing right in front of the door looking inside with his creepy clown mask still on. I jumped back when I saw this, and the man started to walk inside. I ran back towards the end of the store where I had hid before, and I heard the man come in and shout at me to come out and stop hiding like a baby. His footsteps were fast approaching mine, and I knew I probably wouldn't be able to hide from him this time. I was ducking down and quietly moving through aisles to try to hide from the man. This continued for probably a minute, and I knew I couldn't keep this up for much longer. I could hear where the man was, but suddenly I heard the man yell a curse word and then run back to the front and leave the building again. I was confused, but this time decided to stay hiding. Out of curiosity, though, I took a quick peek outside. This time I saw a police car in the parking lot, and it turned its flashing lights on as I saw another car starting to drive away. I stayed hidden until I saw the police stopping the man, and I knew it was safe. I guess my call to the police had gone through, even though I hadn't been able to speak with them. Luckily, the man was caught, and after this night, I decided I didn't want to work overnights again. I still worked there for another few months, even working late shifts, but didn't have to work by myself again.
I'm a female and have an Instagram account like many other people. I post pictures on my page here and there, and I always enjoy seeing how many likes and comments that my pictures get. Most of the comments and likes are from my good friends, but of course, not all of them are. Like many other people, I've experienced several creeps online. Sometimes random men will like my pictures, comment on them, or even send me direct messages. They can get kind of creepy, and sometimes I even delete them. For the most part, though, I don't really care. It happens here and there and doesn't bother me. I remember, though, one time, about a year ago, I posted a picture on Instagram, and some guy liked it and commented on it. I read the comment, but didn't bother to click on his profile or anything. I did not know him, but he commented something like, "Very nice," with a fire emoji. But not long after this, he sent me a direct message as well. He simply said hi to me, but I had no interest in responding. I did click on his page, though, to see who he was. He looked much older than me, and only had a few pictures. I had no idea who he was, and we didn't have any mutual followers, so I ignored him. I've gotten many direct messages from people who I don't know, and most of the time, I don't respond to them. They usually get the idea and leave me alone after I don't reply. I figured this would be no different, but the man sent me another direct message the next day. This one I also ignored. I didn't even open it. Over the next few days, he sent several more messages to me. I didn't bother to read any of them, and I figured eventually the man would give up, but he didn't. Over the next week or so, he sent me messages basically every single day. I would get Instagram notifications several times a day, and at least one of them would be from the man sending me another message. Eventually, I got tired of it and decided to finally block the guy. But before I did, I wanted to read through the messages that he sent me. Right away, I saw that he had sent a photo, and it was my house. I realized that this was no ordinary creep. This man must live in the area, and he somehow knew where I lived. I looked at the other messages that he sent me. He said hi to me over and over again, and then blatantly told me that he knew where I lived. That was followed by a picture of my house, and then him saying hi to me again. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I reported his account to Instagram and then blocked him. However, I wasn't really confident that anything would be done. I didn't think this was worth going to the police either, because I didn't think that the man had broken any laws. Still, I was now very worried. What was this man capable of? I found myself looking out my front window almost constantly for the rest of the day. I lived by myself in a 2-story home near a major US city. For the rest of that day, I did not have to go anywhere, and I did my best to stop worrying. I called several of my friends and spoke with them about it. Unfortunately, none of them could come over and keep me company that night because they were either working or had prior plans. I started to feel better when nothing strange happened for a few hours, but then nighttime came. At around 10 p.m., I was in my living room watching a movie on my TV. By now, my windows were covered with the shades, and I wasn't thinking about the guy as much. My phone hadn't received any strange Instagram notifications either. Part of me had been worried that the man would make another Instagram account and message me again, but that didn't happen. At one point during the movie, I randomly remembered and had the thought to check out the window again. It had been several hours since I had last checked. I turned behind me on the couch and carefully lifted the blinds back. That's when I saw a car parked right out front on the street that I did not recognize. Could that be him? With it being dark out and stuff, obviously I couldn't tell who was driving, but I could tell that there was a person in the driver's seat. I quickly covered the window back up and wondered if the person had seen me. I sat there on the couch for a few moments, thinking of what I should do. Then I heard a car door open and shut. The person was getting out. I carefully moved the window shades again, just barely, just enough to see out. I saw a man walking towards the house through my front yard. This was definitely him. He walked up closer to the house, and I heard him moving just outside of my window. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I really hoped that he would not try to break in. I heard him walking further down to behind the house. This time, I was calling the police for sure. I took out my phone and dialed. I stayed where I was on the couch and spoke with the police as I waited for them to arrive. During this time, I didn't hear or see anything indicating where the man was. Several minutes later, though, I heard a car door open and shut again outside. I was hoping that it was the police arriving, and I looked outside, but instead, I saw it was the man driving away. I was so glad that he was gone, but I also knew that the police would not be able to catch him right away now. They arrived about 5 minutes later. I told them about the man leaving, and gave the best description of him and the car that I could, but I didn't get a very good look at either. I still didn't feel that confident about him being located. I gave the police the whole story, but I had blocked the account, and when I looked at accounts that I had blocked, it must have been deleted because it was gone. After the police left, I was still very worried. I decided that I would stay at one of my friend's houses for the next few days. This was a big help to me because I knew that the man still knew where I lived and he might return. The very next night, I got a direct message request from a random Instagram account. The username was user and then a bunch of random numbers, and it had no profile picture. They sent me just a photograph, and it was of my bedroom window. It was taken from my yard. That must have been what he was doing. I showed the picture to my friend, and we went to the police with it, but I don't know that there was much they could do. The account had no pictures or any information on it. They did say that they would investigate, though. Several days went by without anything happening. I decided that I would return to my house. I drove back there in the morning, but when I got there, I noticed that it had been broken into. The window to the back door had been smashed. I called the police immediately and ran back outside to my car in fear that the man was still inside my house. They arrived very quickly and entered my house. They were inside for a while, but soon they came out with the man. He had been hiding inside of my house. I guess he had broken in the previous night and was waiting for me to return. I'm so glad that he was caught, and I will never forget that experience.
I'm a female and recently moved into a new apartment. It's not too far from where I previously lived, so I know the city well. I really like my place and live in a one-bedroom unit on the second floor of the building. When I first moved in, about 3 weeks ago now, I didn't have much furniture. Where I lived in the past, I had roommates who owned a lot of the bigger things, like couches, tables, and lamps. After getting into my apartment and bringing all of my things inside, I realized that I needed to go shopping for some furniture badly. Over the next few days, I looked at countless websites online. I knew what I wanted for most of the things and did get a couple online, but I found that there was a lot of good furniture at IKEA. The IKEA store was a little bit outside of the city and about 15 minutes from my apartment. So on Saturday morning, I got in my car and headed to IKEA for some basic furniture and decorations. I had been there a couple of times before and knew what to expect. The place is massive and you could easily spend hours in there. I probably got there at like 10 a.m. and sure enough was there for about 2 hours. I looked at so many different things and ended up getting a decent amount of furniture and objects. The time that I was there, the store started out relatively quiet but picked up as the day went on. When I was just about done, things were pretty busy. I saw a lot of different people, and when I finally left, loaded up my car and headed home. I was excited to get back and finally decorate my apartment. It took me a couple of trips to bring everything up, but once I was in, I started the job of building a few pieces of furniture. I furnished my apartment for most of the day, taking breaks here and there. That night, though, as I was hanging some artwork on the wall, there was a knock on my apartment door. I had no idea who it would be. It was like 10 p.m., so kind of late. I walked over to the door and looked through the little peephole, but nobody was there. This was strange, because I hadn't really met any of my neighbors yet, and none of my friends were coming to visit me or anything. I opened up my door and stepped out into the hallway to look around. However, I didn't see anyone. After that, I just went back inside and continued on what I was doing. I finally finished for the night about 10 minutes later. Then I sat down on my couch and relaxed by watching something on TV. But it was then that my cell phone started to ring. It was on the couch next to me and I felt it vibrating. I picked it up to see that there was a call coming in from an unknown number. I had a terrible feeling instantly. I didn't bother to answer it because I had no clue who it was, although I somehow felt like it was connected to the random knocking at my front door. Whoever called me did not leave a voicemail. For the rest of that night, they didn't call back, whoever it was. I went to bed maybe an hour later. But that very same night, I woke up sometime at about 3 a.m. or so. At first, after waking up, I just rolled over to my other side and closed my eyes to go back to sleep. I was not wide awake or anything, still pretty sleepy. But that's when I thought I heard the sound of somebody trying to enter my apartment. It was the doorknob turning, but it didn't open because of the door being locked. After hearing that, I was now wide awake. I wasn't sure what to do, but I didn't hear any noise for a few minutes. I decided to get up and go investigate. Without turning any lights on, I quietly walked over to my front door. When I looked through the peephole this time, there was nobody there again. I did not go out into the hallway to look, though. I was too scared to do that this time. I just walked back into my bedroom and attempted to go back to sleep, but it took me a little while. Eventually, though, I did. A couple of more strange occurrences like this happened over the course of the next several days. None of them were as eventful as the first night, but 2 days later, I got another phone call from an unknown number late at night. Then, the very next night, there was just 2 knocks on my front door. It was a little bit earlier this time, at like 8 p.m. When I went over to look out, once again, nobody was there. The next night is when I started to figure out some things, though. I got another random knock on the door late at night. And when I looked through the peephole again, like always, I couldn't see anything. I just saw white when I looked through. I was very hesitant to open my door. I was afraid that somebody would be right there or something, so I decided not to go out. But about an hour later, I hadn't heard anything more that strange, so I decided to go out and look. When I opened up my door, no one was there in the hallway or anything, but I saw that somebody had taped a white envelope to my door right over the peephole. I grabbed it and then went inside. When I opened it up, there was a handwritten letter. It was very creepy to say the least. The letter seemed like it was from a sort of cryptic stalker. The person described how they had seen me the other day. They said they regretted not talking to me and asked if they had gotten my attention now. They also asked me why I hadn't answered their calls. I was beyond creeped out by this. But it doesn't end there. The next morning when I got up, I checked my phone. I had a text message from a new number. The texts were just a few pictures and videos. I saw the pictures appeared to be me when I was inside of IKEA. Most of them were zoomed in and taken from kind of far away. I had no idea that they had been taken either. There were a couple of short and shaky videos as well. They maybe lasted about 5 seconds or less each, and they showed me walking in IKEA. I realize now where this person had probably first seen me. After seeing these texts, I took some screenshots and then decided that I would go to the police. That very same day, I went and reported everything. I was told that they would look into it, and I'm really hoping that they find the person, whoever it is. That was not long ago at all. So far, the person has not been found yet, and I have no clue who it could be. The good news is that I haven't been bothered by them since. Nothing strange has happened at all. No random phone calls or texts. No knocks on my door or anything. I just hope it stays that way. This happened just a couple of months ago. I was on Facebook on my phone one night, as I would be on almost a daily basis. I was scrolling through my friends' posts and looking at news and other stuff for a while. I was kind of bored, so I just decided to click on the Marketplace tab to see if there was anything cool on there. I had used Facebook Marketplace once in the past to buy a phone, and it worked out really well, so I would go back and look to see what they had occasionally. I saw the average stuff you see: cars, phones, laptops, and other random junk. Then I saw an ad for a free TV. It looked like a newer TV, and I was actually kind of wanting to get one for my bedroom, so I clicked on the ad. I was wanting to see if the TV was broken or had a problem with it, and that's why it was free, or if it was good and working. When I clicked on it, I saw that it was a 50-inch TV. The pictures showed that it was standing on the floor of a carpeted room, and they had one of the TV on, showing that it worked. The post was made by a woman named Barbara, and she said she was moving out and didn't need the TV anymore, but it worked just fine. When I looked, the listing said it had been posted about an hour ago. I responded to the post asking if the TV was still available, and if so, I could pick it up at the earliest convenience. I got a message back from the owner about 10 minutes later. Barbara said that yes, it was, and if I wanted the TV, I could come and pick it up the next evening. We agreed on 8 p.m., and it was set. I was really excited to get the TV, because I knew it was most likely worth hundreds of dollars, and I had been thinking of buying one soon. The next afternoon, I messaged Barbara to confirm, and she told me just to let her know when I was there, and she would let me in. I went to work that day. When I got off, I went home for a while before leaving for Barbara's. She had given me her address earlier in the day, and she seemed like a very friendly person. I put the address into my phone and followed the instructions on getting there. It wasn't too far away, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. When I got to the neighborhood, it seemed pretty average, a little bit farther out from the city, and the houses seemed to have a little more land. I then turned onto a road which had a sign that said "Dead End." I kept driving, and when I got to the end of the street, it led to a single skinny driveway, which according to my directions was Barbara's house. The long skinny driveway led right up to a detached garage with an old-looking pickup truck parked in front of it. I decided to drive into the driveway because I didn't want to carry the TV that long of a ways to my vehicle, and I thought it would be easier. Once I parked, I messaged Barbara telling her that I was there. She responded almost immediately, saying that I could come right on in and the TV was on the floor in the living room. I got out and walked up to the front door. It was dark out by now, and as I approached the door, I noticed that all the lights in the house appeared to be off. It seemed a little strange, but I got to the front door and slowly opened it. It was unlocked, and when I got inside, I couldn't really see anything. I looked around on the wall for a light switch, and had to turn on the flashlight on my phone after I couldn't find one within a few seconds. Finally, I found one and I turned it on. A very dim light in the corner of the room appeared. I could see that it was an old living room with lawn carpet and some furniture. I didn't see a TV at all inside, and I suddenly started to get a bad feeling. I walked a little bit farther into the house. There was a kitchen off the living room which looked pretty average, and then a hallway leading to a back door and another type of living room, it appeared. There was also a staircase going upstairs and one going down to the basement. I couldn't find the TV anywhere, and the place was giving me the creeps. I opened up the Facebook app and messaged Barbara again, telling her that I couldn't find the TV and confirming the address with her, asking if it was correct. I waited in the silent house for her response, but I was getting the urge to just leave. Finally, I got a response from Barbara. Barbara said, yes, it's the correct address. And then she said, sorry, I meant the upstairs living area. There's a staircase in the living room you can take. I got suspicious and was wondering why Barbara didn't just come and talk to me, and why she wouldn't have mentioned to go upstairs right away. I walked towards the stairs anyways, though. But as I was about to take my first step up, I heard someone walking to the front door of the house. They were outside and turned around and saw the screen door open up, and the front door to the house, which I had left half open, then swung shut. All I saw was an arm closing it, but not the person. It appeared it was a man's arm, and after the door shut, I heard someone start to come up the stairs from the basement. I walked away from the stairs, and then went to the back of the house. I was really creeped out now, and once I saw the back door, I made a run for it. Just as I was, I heard whoever was coming upstairs from the basement move faster up the stairs. Once I got to the back door, I opened it and went outside. It was tall grass, and I saw many trees and wildflowers. I ran sideways through the backyard until I was in the neighbor's backyard. Then I went through a few more yards. I basically walked through a few people's backyards and then past someone's house to get back to the street. I looked from there at the house I had just been to. I couldn't see much in the night, but my car was there and I knew I needed to get back to it. I then looked at my phone and saw several messages from Barbara. She said, "Come back," and she asked me why I left in all caps. I certainly did not want to go back there, but I walked slowly down the street to get back to my car, which was parked in her driveway. Once I made it to the front of the driveway, I didn't see anybody in the front yard at all. I then sprinted to my car and unlocked it. When I got inside, I saw that my front windshield had been smashed and the glass was all shattered. I backed out of the driveway, and as I did, I appeared to see a man looking at me from the front window of the house. He had a sort of evil smile on his face. When I got back, I reported Barbara and what had happened. I really don't think Barbara was even real, and it was probably that guy that was looking at me through the window. I think I might have walked into some sort of setup, but beyond that, I have no clue what was going on there.